It's the Huston podcast.
This segment is called DEC Reality Check. This is the DEC Reality Check, okay? And this is based on this is based on the opinions and what I have seen as an environmental activist over many years. I live on donations and grants, and I do public service work full time. I have about $500 of expenses that I can't pay this month. So I really need your help, friends. If you appreciate my work, if you appreciated this video, if you appreciate the research, the deep research that I do, you appreciate these videos that I do and have done, and here's what I've done with my life for the past 10 years. Bill Huston's fracking resume. Just go look that up. You're going to see I've done a lot of stuff, including some local work. I mean, I did a lot of state level work, but I did a lot of local work, including, we fought that Speedies permit in Endicott for about 4 years. So Google Bill Huston's fracking resume, and if you can, tinyurl.com/donate to Bill Huston. Donations are appreciated in any amount. I hear this all the time, from people on the street, and somebody brings up like the PFAS, the Teflon chemicals that were contaminating in somebody's water. It's like, how did this happen? The DEC, I thought the DEC was going to protect us. Or people generally say, oh, that would never happen in New York because, the DEC is there to protect us. The DEC is making sure everything is safe. I've heard the mayor of Endicott, Mayor John Bertoni, say this. The DEC is going to make it safe. He's very trusting, and people that say this are very trusting of the DEC. But I have worked with the DEC over many different projects. I've, engaged in these different permitting things, and even engaged in, I recorded an issues conference, which is this technical conference trying to resolve a dispute that went on for the gas storage, LPG gas storage at Seneca Lake. I've really, watched a lot of these go on, and what I will tell you is that the DEC, there's a lot of issues with the DEC, and the DEC really isn't doing very much to keep us safe, and we're going to get into that. Here are some challenges that we're finding in fighting this permit that we're fighting. I kind of expect the government to be there to as a protective role. The police are a protective role. My friend Shauna was talking about the origins of the police power. I would recommend you go read a pamphlet called The Law by Frederic Bastiat or Bastier. But I believe the police power is a legitimate power. It's based on the individual right of self-defense. So this is what we expect from the government. This is what I expect. I expect the government to, protect me from harms. But in this case, this potential great harm that's coming to Endicott, it's the government that's bringing it to us. So there's kind of a conflict of interest. The government is fast-tracking it. So this is a challenge that we're finding in fighting this project. We have to make a big noise because the DEC almost never listens to community concerns unless we make a big noise. We have to make a big noise, friends. And there aren't many people engaged. So, you and I, the people watching this, we potentially can make a huge difference here, a huge difference. And especially if you go out and talk to your neighbors and share this video. And I'm going to make these shorter clips, so they're going to be easier to share. The local environmental groups, I'm sorry, they're unfortunately not strong advocates for the environment. We've got two. We've got WBESC, and we've got the Susquehanna group of the Sierra Club. And there are some strong people in the Susquehanna group, some really great people. But the group itself, I didn't even hear them saying they wanted to, using the word demand is even a little harsh for, this group. I mean, they're nice. There are some good fighters in there, but the group itself, I didn't even hear them basically make a demand for a public hearing. I read some emails back and forth where people in the group were making excuses like, oh, we know the DEC is understaffed. And that's very unfortunate, I think. And I'm just calling it like I see it, even though I have some good friends and supporters in the Sierra Club, the local group. I don't see fierce environmental warriors, and would really like to see some greater interest and some greater oomph coming from the local Sierra Club. WBESC, once again, the leader of the WBESC. Very nice guy. Somebody you want to invite to the cuddle party. But he initially came out and wrote a letter to the DEC saying he supported a public hearing, and then he went back on that for some reason. I don't know. So even Jim Little, you went both ways, brother. I'm just saying. I just think a public hearing is such a simple, basic thing, and there's our asks are so simple and basic that I can't imagine anybody that would just let this fast track happen. And the way that it's happening too, the sloppiness with the paperwork, the neglect, the typical neglect that we're getting from the DEC in terms of distributing the information so that people can get to it. One interesting thing about this is I feel like we're fighting the Greens. We're fighting the environmentalists, because what I get is that what I'm hearing is that everybody thinks that that electric cars are necessary for the new green revolution. We need electric cars for this transition to this sustainable future. So I hear people say, well, I even heard this from Dr. Gay Cano, the ETM Solar. She was like, we got to put these plants somewhere. My good friend Valdy Wiederpass, I even heard him talk along these lines. We have to have these plants. We have to have electric cars. And these batteries do have to be reclaimed at some point. They got to go somewhere. Maybe there's a way to do this safely in Endicott. But I think one of the things going on here in the minds of the politicians is that Endicott is damaged goods. Endicott's already contaminated, so sure, let's put it in Endicott. Endicott's already messed up, which is not a good attitude to have. Because that's where environmental justice comes into play. So we expect the DEC to provide some resistance. That's their duty, isn't it, to protect the environment? We're looking for the DEC to provide some resistance to these industrial polluters, but what we find is that DEC is like butter. And so what we found with the stink trucks, okay? 80,000 gallons per day of landfill, mostly landfill leachate. Some of it was 10 times super concentrated reverse osmosis landfill leachate. And then there was Dr. Reddy's labs in Middleburg, New York, which was sending 5,000 gallons per month of pregnant mare's urine contaminated with MTBE, methyl tert butyl ether, a banned gasoline additive. Coming into a new commercial waste treatment facility that was started in 2011. Jim Little, Jim's in the chat. Jim was one of the early investigators, along with Mark Bacon, figuring out what these trucks were, leachate trucks. This is what we found. We fought this thing for 3 or maybe 4 years. How many years was it, Jim, that we fought this Speedies permit modification? Here's what we found out, okay? You think the DEC is watching out for you? Here's what we found out. They never deny a permit. They rely on self-reporting. They never verify the lab results of the test results that they get that are self-reported, and they never send out anybody to do independent testing. They never do physical inspections of the integrity of the plant. They never assess fines or make enforcement actions. So what do they do? What do they do? What's the point of the DEC? Okay, they say the DEC is chronically understaffed and underfunded. That's a real problem, and that's a problem we need to deal with our legislators to get them, get the DEC, fully funded. But it's not my problem. It doesn't. The decision of whether Endicott deserves a public hearing or not is independent of DEC staffing levels. So I don't think that we shouldn't be making excuses for the DEC because they're understaffed or underfunded. We still deserve a public hearing. Now, one thing that I've noticed with these DEC people is they feel like that they lack the statutory authority to, not necessarily with the DEC. I've seen this in other regulatory agencies, like the DOT with these bomb trucks, is that we occasionally find people that really do care and they really want to help, and they want to help protect the community from these potential sources of great harm. But what we find is they're like, I get my authority from the statutes, and the statutes are silent on this thing. So how can I act if I don't have the authority? So even the DEC people feel like that they're trapped to some degree. And this is something I think a lot of people do not understand, is that most people, I think that the DEC sort of just has this general authority to protect people from environmental harms. But they don't. They don't. They have very specific authority that's granted by the statutes. So that's something that common people should understand, that there's a lot of limitations on the DEC's power. And this is by design, I believe. I've actually had a couple people mention this to me, that, basically they think that I'm a little too harsh with my criticisms of the DEC and these legislators. And the general rule is something like this. It's don't insult the people you are trying to persuade. And, like I get this when, some of these libertarian types that are out there, they'll say, sheeple, what's the matter with you, stupid sheeple? There's an example of somebody that's that's insulting somebody that they're trying to persuade. This is never going to work. So I do recognize that words are creative. And I do recognize that if we curse somebody with a label like corrupt, you're just a corrupt politician, that creates a kind of a reality. The words create the reality, and it puts the people in a box that they can't really escape from. So we have to leave room that most people in these jobs are trying to do good. They think they're trying to do good. I'm convinced of it. So I think what we need to do is we need to imagine the best possible scenario, like we imagine that these regulators and these politicians really want to do their job and to protect us, and they're capable of doing their job and protecting us, and they're interested in that. We have to imagine it, but we also have to see it with our own eyes. So we, citizens, if you care about breathing clean air, we have to work hard and not give up, and we have to keep the pressure up on these politicians and these environmental regulators. And okay, so I get it. We got to be nice. I get that. But there's another side to this thing, too. And the other side is that somebody should put up a strong resistance. Somebody somewhere. If it's not the elected officials, some toxic industry comes to town, or some toxic facility, some dangerous thing that presents a risk to the public safety, somebody, if it's not the elected officials, if it's not the environmental regulators, if it's not the environmental NGOs, the nonprofits, then who is it? Who's it going to be? If it's not any of these people, these are the people that I expect to put up some resistance, and they're not. They're not putting up any resistance. They're like butter. So once again, friends, sorry about that. Once again, it is up to us. It's up to us, you and me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested in this, because we got a lot of work to do. But we don't need a lot of people. What I've seen is a small number of really dedicated people can make a big difference. So just sharing these videos, talking this up around town, talked up these issues around town when you talk to people, and call Donna Lupardo, call Jason Garner, call Fred Akshar, call John Bertoni, call the DEP or the DEC guy. We're going to put his name back up here in a minute. There's a lot of things that we can do, and we have until December December 5th. December 5th. We have until December 5th to make a difference. So what I like to do is when I approach environmental activism is that I try to imagine the worst possible scenario. So like there was a group that I was involved with up in the Ithaca area having to do with the CNG, these high pressure CNG bulk haul type 4 virtual pipeline tube trailers, which I like to call bomb trucks. And we had a group up there, and they had a representative. I'm not going to say the group. I'm not going to say the rep, but somebody got up there, in some kind of an official capacity as a environmental scientist and a concerned citizen, and they were saying things like, "Oh, these trucks are perfectly safe. They're well engineered." Like what? Why would you say that? Your whole purpose as a community organizer and as an educator is to present the worst possible scenario. And, not to go into, super speculative realms and not, scare people based on, extreme improbabilities, things like that. I mean, it should be based in science and based in fact. But, start out with your attitude should be in looking for, as an environmental activist, look for the worst possible thing. Because somebody has to. This is what we do. This is called doing our due diligence. So I like to assume that the industry is corrupt and they do want to poison us all for profits, and that the industry lies via advertising and public relations. And yes, they do. That is rooted in truth. And then I like to think that business is amoral. And it doesn't mean that they're evil. It just means that morality is not a component in the business cost benefit equation. It just doesn't come up. It's not part of it. So this is why, and the same is true with science. And this is why we have vivisection. This is why we have, these scientific labs where these, cages and battery cages of rabbits and cats and monkeys and dogs that are tortured in order that we, do these scientific experiments, because morality doesn't play a ethics isn't there. Ethics is not taught in the university. It is taught, but it's a separate thing. It's not part of a scientific education. It's not integral to your work as a scientist is not taught as ethics is this critical component. And I like to sort of imagine that all the politicians and regulators are corrupt. They're incompetent. They're asleep. They're afraid, or they believe in their own powerlessness. I don't know why these people don't protect the environment. There's a lot of reasons, but you just imagine the worst case. This is my idea here. So, So getting into the cuddle party list, looking for fierce warriors, and I'm getting cuddle party list. WBESC. You're except for Mark Bacon and Jim Little half the time. You're on the cuddle party list. Susquehanna Sierra Club, except for a couple of strong people there. A lot of you are getting on the cuddle party list, unless you can get a little bit stronger in your language, asking for some basic things like a environmental impact statement and like a public hearing. Okay, I got to be careful because I get good friends and supporters in the Sierra Club. So now let's get back to the DEC. This is some frank talk. This is the truth. This is observables. If my friend Mickey is watching, I have to be careful about observables versus judgments, because Mickey gets mad at me if I get into judgments. For watching now. I see Jim Little in there still. I'll read your stuff in a minute, Jim. If you're new, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the Endicott battery incinerator and the Endicott battery production facility that's missing in action. It's not there. Be sure to hit a like, a thumbs up on the YouTube channel, and subscribe and leave a comment in the chat and just say hi. Tell us that you're watching. So, the DEC likes to keep the public ignorant and impotent, which means powerlessness, by various schemes. And let's go through some of these schemes right now, shall we? So one of the schemes is these unlisted or unpublished seeker actions. Like in 2011, Jim Little actually found this document. Jim Little did a foil during when we were fighting the stink trucks. He did a foil and he got this single page back, and it was brilliant. It was a very powerful single page because it had a list of some of the breakdowns of the toxins that were in the effluent that they were treating there at the facility in 2011, and it also told us that they started a pilot program in 2011. That's what this one page told us that Jim Little somehow got. There was a pilot program that started in 2011, and guess what they did? They made it an unpublished seeker decision. Huh. So, is this like a pattern for Endicott that the DEC does these unpublished seeker actions? So, what's interesting about an unpublished seeker action? Well, in New York, there's a law called the Article 78 law, and it challenges the an official action of some kind. Could be an action of a zoning board, or could be a legislative body. You want to challenge that action, you've got a very short, I think it's a 60-day deadline to file a legal challenge. It's called an Article 78. Well, we found out about this pilot program in like 2013, a couple of years later, long past the Article 78 deadline. So here's the point that I'm trying to make. With these unlisted actions, like the stink trucks, the Speedies permit for the landfill leachate trucks, right? Unlisted action began as a pilot program. It was basically done in secret. And that's what's being done with this battery incinerator. It's an unlisted seeker action. Because you can't challenge an action that you never found out about. So somehow we found out about this thing. Somehow the applicant actually came and sought us out. So if it wasn't for that, we might not even know about this thing, because this is all being fast-tracked, and the DEC is even telling us that they didn't need to issue a state air certificate or a state air permit. All they needed to do was they called it a registration, which is almost like it's so minor. It's just some very minor paperwork that needs to be done. Because everybody says, oh, the emissions are so small that it doesn't require any complicated paperwork. We almost got that, but they said, oh, even though it's suitable for registration, we're still going to issue this state site air permit, which is a little bit more paperwork. So thank God we got that. Can you believe I just said that? Oh my God. But no public hearings. They weren't going to give us a public hearing with the stink trucks until we banged on them for years. We want a public hearing. We want a public hearing. We want a public hearing. They finally gave in to us, right? But this is one way, not having public hearings, that the DEC controls the conversation and basically keeps us, because public hearings aren't just for the DEC to listen to us, right? It's public hearings for us to listen to each other. This is why, for years when the fracking fight was going on in New York, I would grab my video camera and go to all these public hearings and record them, and not only to have it for the record for other people to watch who weren't there, but I benefited tremendously from being there. I learned so much by listening to all these different perspectives. So what I found was a lot of people come to public hearings just to hear what other people have to say, just to learn about what the project is about. Sometimes people don't even come with prepared comments. They just come and listen. So there's a lot of reasons to have these public hearings. It's not just to put our feelings on the record. It's to form a community and to talk to each other. Okay, sometimes they have public hearings and basically the mics are not turned on. And I mean that metaphorically. I mean that, nobody is reading the comments. Nobody in the decision. It's basically Nobody's paying attention in Albany, so it's basically what they call a moot court. And once again, I feel like this is done by design to keep us out of the loop and to keep us ignorant and disempowered. And here's what we also saw was that during the stink trucks fighting that Speedies permit, that the DEC, this was mind-blowing. I just couldn't believe it. But the DEC basically was acting as a project sponsor, because when it came time, the DEC guy, Reggie, goes up and stands in front of the crowd there, and he reads a prepared statement about how this is protective of water quality, how dumping, hundreds of tons of, chemical solvents and heavy metals and oil and grease and all kinds of crap into the Susquehanna River was somehow protective of water quality, and do it with a straight face. The DEC was acting, it seemed like they were acting as a project sponsor, and they were advocating that the project should be permitted. So I really shouldn't be surprised by this, because I've witnessed this before. For example, at the Susquehanna River Basin Commission meeting, December 15, 2011, where again, staff is advocating for these water withdrawal permits.
Staff is recommending approval of that with a protected pass-by, seasonal nature, 10% average daily flow from July, August, September, October, and 20% average daily flow the remainder of the year.
Are you sleeping, right?
Yeah, that's my... Don't go back to Oklahoma.
Ladies and gentlemen, please.
Then I saw it again with the DEC Commissioner Martens before a legislative hearing, and here again, he's advocating for the passage of the SGIS.
I would argue that most of the SGIS is a health impact review and addresses health impacts, the potential health impacts to both health and the environment. We identified all the potential impacts, adverse impacts, and it was not exclusive to the environment. It included public health impacts. We listed all the potential chemicals that could be used in the process. And then the approach was to see if we could identify specific mitigation measures, which is in Chapter 7, that would prevent public exposure, human exposure, to the chemicals that are used in the process.
And then we have the issues conference between parties that was held February 13th, 2015. The DEC staff was seen by many people in the audience passing notes to the applicant during the proceedings. I went with Dave Walzak after the meeting to try to talk to some people about this.
Can I get a copy, because I'd like to make sure that my people, have material. That they have a sense of.
Hey, I'm Dave Walzak. Are you a lawyer? No. You are? Okay.
Yeah, no.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a question for this gentleman.
No, you can't.
Oh, I can't. Is that because he's staff?
Oh my God.
Is that because he's
I was just
staff?
saying hello. That's
Oh,
all.
okay.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Oh, I can't ask you a question then.
Can I ask what's your question? I'll try to get an answer back for you. If you need to
Okay.
hear.
Well, I saw, what was his name again?
Kids are good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had twins.
Peter Briggs,
Oh,
yeah. I saw him exchanging notes with the table next, and I was just, with one of the lawyers on the Crestwood team. And so I'm wondering what that was about, and if that was appropriate to be exchanging notes between DEC.
I have your email, and I can certainly try to follow up and
Okay.
ask that particular question and try to get a response back. For
So because I was just denied free access to a public servant, and just right now, I wanted to ask the public servant a question.
But because it's part of the issues conference, that's probably the reason for it.
Oh,
But let me
okay.
find out if I can for you.
Okay.
And I know you have my email address, and I have yours.
Yeah,
So I'll try to
okay.
get back to you. Okay.
Well, okay, we'll have to do it that way.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Stay warm.
So I shouldn't be so shocked when I see the regulatory agency advocating for the permit, because really, it's rather common.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? That's very nice! Coming from someone as boring as you!